just speak.
Is it on?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. So, good morning. We're going to start. What? Just a, okay. Fine. Yeah. Okay. So after a week of discussion about how to collect data, how to process data, how to make useful consideration and planning with the data that you can get, today we are moving towards a new session that is speaking about new sensor. We are presenting a new sensor, cost-effective sensor that can help to collect data. And together with new sensor, we are also discussing about some of the initiatives that we can use in order to deploy the sensor and collect the data and feed all the different systems that we have seen today in this week. So I would like to introduce also Patrick for some more words about the cost-effective technologies for ocean data monitoring and data collection.
We can say something like that.
Yeah.
Something like that. What we decided on, Antonio and I, because we have a pretty tough agenda for today, is that we're not going to present, we're not going to show stuff. We just do a very short introduction so we can get going. It's not about us, it's about you. We want to see what you do. We want to find the networking going on. We need to get the discussions running. One thing is clear, there's a massive need for more ocean observations. People are screaming for it. We have a UN Ocean Decade running at the moment. We have something that is the GOOS Global Ocean Observing System screaming for more marine data. We have data aggregators, we have local needs, we have scientists. Everyone is asking for more data. This is something that we for sure can produce in this room, make more data available, but in a very cost-efficient way. We stop there, I think, and we just get going, right?
Yes, exactly. I mean, as you can see from the, let's say, the agenda, we start just to recap a bit of the scene. So we need to collect data, but we need to do it in a proper way. So we need some best practice on that. Then we need to apply some good data management things. And this data, why we need also this data? Because we need more, let's say, services. But to deploy new services, we need high performance computing and cloud services. So we are going to have also an introduction and presentation about this kind of technology. And then we said, I mean, we have been talking for the full week about the importance of citizen science initiative in order to collect data. And so we are going to have many initiatives that are presenting on that. Then we have 10 minutes for each presentation. I mean, the citizen science and sensor one. So I kindly ask you to stay in 5 minutes. So we are going to have some time for questions. I mean, the introduction could be longer.
Antonio, we have some nervous people in the room. We'll give you a sign after 5, and then we'll give you a sign when there's 2 left. And people will have questions, right? So if you do your full 10 minutes, no time for questions. Sorry about that.
And I guess that today it's really a discussion event, so we need time to discuss, at least to address a couple of questions after the presentation. So please consider that people are eager to understand and ask.
And just one more thing, we've set up a number of these similar kind of events the past year, I would say. And the first ones we had like, what, 7, 8 people attending. So this is just growing. It's a massive momentum going on at the moment. And this is by far the biggest one we had so far. And this is only the beginning. We're trying to pull all this together, see who's doing what, and trying to make use of everything that you're doing in the room here.
Yes, and you say so. I mean, you said probably. I mean, the momentum is really increasing because also the GOOS is also having, an eye on this kind of activities because they are thinking about considering citizen science as an emerging network. So again, I mean, the momentum is high.
So it's all these things. It's about the Ocean Decade. It's GOOS. It's even WMO are getting interested in what's happening with the low cost. So it's on the big agendas. So we need to bring the local up to the global and back down again.
And you need to deliver your data into Imonet and the other platform.
Okay. So
please.
With that.
Yeah. Without it doesn't work. So,
done.
Yeah. And okay. Last message. This is a logistic message. Please stay on this side of the stage when you get in because we have some electric problems on that side. So stay here. And then you can also see your presentation from the back mirror screen.
So, makes sense.
So we would like to have on the stage the first speaker. That is Jay.
Jay Perlman.
Thank you.
it's around, you know. We already got it there. Yeah, yes.
You want to put this slide up?
Yeah.
Oh, there it is. That's great. Well, welcome and thank you for inviting me. That's a hard act to follow, isn't it? So my goal here is to talk about the best practices that Antonio mentioned, but the real goal is to set the foundation for the discussion for today. So I'm going to raise a number of questions which are food for thought, which are things you should think about as we go through the day, and perhaps toward the end of the day they would generate interesting discussions. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge my co-authors, Jay Perlman, that's me, Jetham de Hoopman, who is from South Africa and is our lead, our task team lead on low-cost and best practices for limited infrastructures. And then Dori, Dror, and Emily are from Israel and are working on the work with jellyfish that I'll be showing. So I acknowledge all of their contributions. Okay, good. And to make this talk very simple in case you fall asleep in the middle, I want to give you the bottom line right now. And that is trust, interoperability, and inclusiveness, the God speak, are really the priorities. And we need to think as we develop sensors and other things, in fact, that's what we need. And all of these rely on creating and then using best practices. And so that will be the themes as we go through. Let's talk first about the world of low-cost sensors, globalizing the contributions of scientists and citizens. We've heard much about data gaps. My concern in making that statement is by setting the objectives of global, we lose a lot of what may be the important part of what we're doing. These low-cost sensors may be needed for local, regional, particularly coastal environments as a priority. And so we want to be very careful when we think of who the customer base and who the real needs are. Then creating methods so that data are interoperable and of consistent quality. You'll note I don't say high quality, because sometimes the things that you need for climate observations, 0.1% or whatever the number is, are not needed for coastal observations, where a few percent may be quite adequate. And so I think we want to be very careful when we make the demands on the sensors and the processing to be realistic and I'll say fit for purpose, something that Goose keeps reminding me of over time. And the last comment in terms of our new world here is engaging and learning about observations analysis. It's basically capacity building. We can't just throw a sensor at somebody and expect to get interoperable, consistent quality. We need to do training. And so those are the three key elements that I think relate to the discussions today. And we should talk about who are our customers, who are we focused on, who really needs our sensors as part of the dialogue that we have. Okay, and Jetham gave me this very nice slide of some of the advances that are occurring. The emphasis here is on 3D printing and the ability to make very cheap, consistent, readily available sensors. And that's our day today, so I won't dwell on that. But I want to move on to the question now of how do we actually decide what we want to look at, how do we make measurements? And this is from my colleagues at the University of Haifa, where they're looking at jellyfish along the coast. And I won't tell you why it's important because I'm sure you all know. And they put out a survey and they asked the questions, well, first, how do we do our measurements? Is it that we're looking at the exact number of abundance, maybe just quantitative or qualitative, a few and many, or we rank them? There were sort of between 1 and 5 here and 6 and 10 there. And the survey results are shown here. These are not published yet, so they're preliminary, but they'll be formally published. And what we find is that the ranked abundance, doing the same thing with the density, how many per square meter, how many per cubic meter, the response was good. And then finally, data, the Darwin core approach to metadata. I think the point here is not what the results were, but this is a way that they're creating a series of best practices. This is the way they're building a community consensus of how to make measurements in Israel, in France, etc., all over the world. A very, very powerful way to do it. We should think about that. Okay, so what I'm coming to then is best practices. And the first question we have is, what's a best practice? And I could spend probably 3 months on that, but I only have a few minutes. And we've defined that through the Ocean Best Practice System as a best practice is a methodology that has repeatedly produced superior results relative to the other methodologies that are available with the same objective. It's important to say the same objective. This is a definition that's very important, and a best practice is then when multiple organizations adopt the same practice, they use it in the same way. In fact, we want to recognize that we who are trying to facilitate these are really not creating the practice. It's you folks. It's you who are creating the sensors. It's you who are processing the data that are going to define the methods that are best to be used. We do want to, however, comment that best is a very, very difficult word. People are very much afraid. I don't know if mine's best, therefore I won't submit it to the repository. That's the wrong answer. You have to treat them as methods, not best practices, and from those methods we will eventually develop what's best. And I'll talk about that in a minute. So why do we want to use these? First, it's efficient use of time. Don't reinvent the wheel, learn from others, all of the things that we talk about. That's what the documented methods are. Collaborative opportunities. When you know what somebody else is doing in their measurements, you can work with them more easily. And then interoperability is obvious. We have to go to data comparability, and particularly the ability to collate data as we try to build a regional and global system. And if everybody does their own measurements in their own way, it's a real mess. And there are a few in the audience here who can tell you the challenges that are involved with that. And then trust in the data I mentioned earlier. It's easier to get regulations created if the regulatory authorities trust your data and if you use the practices that they believe in. And then finally, it's easier to apply for funding. Okay, so those are the reasons you want to use best practices. I'm sure you have your own, or you can think about them. And the question next is, where do you find them? And so about 8 or 10 years ago, there was a whole fragmentation. Best practices were not in one place or even just a few places. They were mainly in the desk drawers of the universities that developed the practice, and they never really got documented. And so we created the Ocean Best Practice System. It's part of IOC, UNESCO, as a project there. And our job is to provide a sustained repository for the practices, and you can easily get them on the web. And shame on me that I don't have the URL there, but it's oceanbestpractices.org. Now, what happened was we started getting the practices, but the academics in the world said, we don't get any credit because we don't document things that aren't published, because it's peer-reviewed publications that are our metrics. And so we created a journal in the Frontiers in Marine Science to publish peer-reviewed best practices. And that's gone very, very well. And we provide training and user support. One of the things we found was that those basic 4 capabilities didn't service all the needs of the community. They said, well, we have some work we want to do. We need a place to do it. It's best practices. eDNA is one good example of a team that's been working with us. Ocean acidification is another. And so we created task teams. And those task teams are run by outside our steering group. We support them. We help coordinate them. And if there are things in the sensor area that we want to address together in terms of methods or best practices, we can form task teams to do that. They typically last 1 to 2 years, and they have a very focused activity. We have a series of ambassadors, the list here, an annual workshop, the next one in October coming up, and Ocean Practices. We have a decade program that's focused on that was endorsed 3 or 4 years ago at the beginning. Global impact, you can see the countries, the red are the ones that are participating in our repository, users that come to us, and it's a global group. And the last workshop had 600 people from literally except Antarctica, every area. One of the challenges in convergence is getting the best practices to come together. Sometimes you'll see 5 or 6 practices that are the same topic, focused on the same thing, and they're not the same. And when we were working initially with GOOS on the essential ocean variables, they stated methods for each of the essential ocean variables, and they didn't agree. And I said, this doesn't help people. And so we began working with GOOS, and GOOS is a co-sponsor of the Ocean Best Practice System as well as IODE, and asked about convergence and how do we bring the community together. And then the last thing was the endorsement, which we started working on 2 years ago. People would come to us and say, there are 10 practices, I have no idea which one to pick, and it's just frustrating. So GOOS set up through their panels an endorsement process where experts get together, they review the practices in a particular topic, and then they go ahead and then literally endorse it. We have about 8 or 9 endorsed practices by the GOOS panel, and now we're looking for other groups to do endorsement. We're talking to ICES recently to do for the fisheries, et cetera, and that's a process coming forward. Okay, the other issue with practices is the maturity. How do you know something is mature enough to adopt? And recently, and this is a journal article we're writing now, to define levels of maturity, starting from things that are documented to those that are broadly adopted, to finally those that are mature. I don't have the time to go through it, but there's a very, very interesting discussion of this that if you want later I can talk with you about. Okay, moving on and trying to come to sort of a conclusion now. I mentioned the task teams. The ones we currently have under Ocean Best Practice System is diversity, equity, and inclusion, value chain analysis, basically how do you connect everything that goes through there from sensors to final end users, omics. There's the coastal observations in under-resourced countries. This is one I'm going to come back to in the next slide. And then finally, decision trees. How do technicians on ships decide how to use their time? When ships are very, very busy, that's a very critical thing, and we have a really good group doing that. So these are, as I said, 2-year type events, and they work. The one for coastal observations in under-resourced countries, it was really part of CoLab, the low-cost sensors, which I'm sure somebody else will talk about. And the problem we ran into is that best practices created in Europe and Australia and the US, Canada, they don't work in Africa well, they don't work in South America. And we got to the point where people were saying to us, how do we adapt, how do we work? And so we have a formal activity that started out as a task team with us, which is focused on Africa, and Jetham and Lucy Kokampo are leading that. And then we recently were awarded an ADAPT program for the Caribbean to help with best practices in the Caribbean. And that's starting now, and it's going to be basically capacity building and training. And then we had recently, about 3 weeks ago, a UN Decade project endorsed, ocean community engaging through best practices. Patrick and Lucy and I put that together. Very, very exciting opportunity, and we want to engage you folks in that, and we're formulating what that means now. So I don't have an answer yet, but we'll listen very carefully to comments. Okay, and with that, I want to come back to my bottom line, which is for data and for sensors and for working with users. Trust, interoperability, inclusiveness are the key that we need to address. And we need the practices that make people trust the things that we do. And for that, I'd like to thank you very much and leave just a couple of minutes for questions if necessary.
Thank you. If there is any burning question, otherwise I would like to do the 3 presentations that are setting the scene, and then we do the question. Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah. Okay, so we started with best practices. We go to, a best practice on data management. So Giuseppe, the stage is yours. Microphone.
Okay. Good morning to everybody, and thanks to the organizer for invitation. I will just follow, it's a follow-up of what presented before, so by Pirman. What is important in best practices is also take in consideration all the data life cycle, essentially from planning the measurements, planning the missions, up to the use of data. Essentially, what is important is not is to have quality data, but also to use and reuse the data as many times as possible. Pop. Okay, just following the discussion that made before by Pirman, essentially we have two kinds of communities. The people collecting data, people using data, they have different requirements. So essentially, we must consider when somebody is using data, they must consider why and how the data have been collected. So essentially, data producers have some requirements that we can call for as fitness for purposes, and the data users could have different requirements. So in that case, they have something that must fit for their particular use. The two words could be different, but in any case, the same data can be used for different uses. The other thing is that essentially also, okay, we start from planning. There are many things to be done during the planning phase, from essentially the calibration to the check of to the definition of sensor to be used during the mission, calibration of the sensors, so the audit of the sensors, as well as a check of the software. But what is important from my point is essentially the part that is dedicated to the personnel. So we are speaking of citizen science, we are speaking that are collected by private and public institutions, but in any case what is important that essentially the personnel is able to understand what they are doing. So essentially what is important, for example, in the Mediterranean, they must know what is the difference in salinity. We can expect a salinity of 36 PSU in coastal waters, but this is not true for open waters. So the personnel must be educated. So the training of the personnel is very important, and probably is the most important part in the planning part and the planning component. Okay, data collection. During data collection, there should be no problem except a continuous check of the instrumentation if it is working well, a check of the data because essentially there could be some decision to be taken if measurements have to be repeated or not. But what can be important also from what I said before, that essentially there could be data that are collected and processed later after the mission, but there could be also data that are transmitted in real time. So essentially the software is very different for delayed mode data and for real-time data. Essentially, for example, gross quality control has to be done on board and the data transmitted offshore. So this is something that the activity that must be in some sense taken into account. So all the process must be documented, and it is important to have also a log of what is done during the data collection. Then process. Okay, what is important? So there were from initial requirements. The question is, have all the requirements been met during the data collection process? If yes or not, essentially also this has to be discussed. And in any case, I would add some additional requirements during the data process that are essentially ISPIRE requirements, that are essentially consistency, completeness, accuracy, lineage, and usability. And these are important points that should be taken into account during the data process. Long-term preservation. So this is a quite important point from my point of view. The data have to be stored in a repository that essentially should assure that the data will be maintained for a long time. So the DOI is one important point. There are some repositories that are providing the DOI, and there are also journals that are providing additional DOIs. So essentially, repositories and journals that are presenting the data are very important. Other thing, conclusion, okay, essentially this is just a short description of the data life cycle. I was not explaining all the passages, but anyway, you can find the best practices in the documentation presented by Pirman. I would just discuss some questions that we have now. Is the problem of big data. Essentially, in the number of data that we are receiving is increasing a lot. In 2020, essentially 59 zettabytes of data were collected, and there is a continuous increase in data collection. So essentially, we are receiving more data than we can analyze. So this is essentially the problem we have today. So what should do? And this is the open question. I don't have a solution, but this is left to you. Should we implement effectively the data management? How can we refine a user data collection process? And can we avoid some data overlay collection? These are questions, but in any case, usability is the first point to be considered. And I think this is the last one. Yes, this is the last one. I was very short.
Thank you. Thank you, Giuseppe. Thank you very much. And by the way, I mean, the last slide was a perfect access to introduce Dick, that is going to elaborate a bit more on this need for computational resources. And so, Dick, stage is yours.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Let me see how it works.
Arrow down. Yeah, do it.
Yep, okay, good. Now we're talking a little bit about the increase in data. We also talk a lot about open data. And what we also do nowadays is that from the data we want to have knowledge. And to create knowledge, we also want to do open science more and more. And I want to talk a little bit about the project that we did and that we are still continuing in the second phase. Let's say for getting more knowledge from the data, using also virtual research environments, using in fact big cloud computing infrastructures, etc., by which we are able to tackle the big data issue, but also we are able, let's say, to do multidisciplinary research so that we have experts or scientists from different domains can work together in a collaborative way. So this started with the pilot Blue Cloud project, and it was a G7, a flagship project. And in fact, it was the idea to explore how we can use such, let's say, a cyber environment to do open science. And we said we're going to deploy a platform where we bring together, we federate together data resources, computing capacities, and also algorithms. And let's say this is the overarching concept. Very simple, in fact, because you say on the base, we have a lot of repositories. You've heard about this all during these days. And let's make a common access and interface, let's say, to those repositories so that we unify or make the data access more unified, let's say, or homogeneous. We use for this standards. We heard about best practices, but there are many standards, let's say, in the IT domain, but also, of course, in the discipline domain. So we need those with, let's say, vocabularies and metadata formats, data formats. And then on top, we say, let's develop a platform, and let's say a virtual research environment where we can bring together these algorithms, the computing, and those data sets, and then work together with excellent scientists in their domain to develop some virtual labs, which are demonstrators of open science, how you can bring together all these elements. Let's see, it's coming. Technology, yeah, okay. So what we did from the start, let's do what we call co-design, co-engineering, co-working. And that means on the left we have a lot of blue data infrastructures. Those are leading in the European domain. And I hope most of you recognize them by now. And on the right we have e-infrastructures, which are, let's say, computing, academic computing institutions and networks over Europe. And we have a lot of CPUs, we have a lot of storage, etc., available. And also we work in this, we work also with ABUNet and Copernicus, Marine, which are two big European initiatives, but we have also a lot of bottom-up research infrastructures and, let's say, other partners. Okay, there are three key, what we call key exploitable results in the project. One is that we make this common discovery and access service, which is like a federation of the interface of the different partners and the repositories. Secondly, this virtual research environment, and thirdly, the virtual labs. And I want to illustrate them a little bit because time is short. First of all, this discovery service, you see on the top half, you see all the repositories that we federated. And we do it in a two-step approach. That means that we first look at collections, a sort of aggregation of all the data. And then we have right now about 25,000 entries, which is reasonable for doing discovery, to find out, let's say, the data sets that you're looking for, in which of the repositories they might reside. And then the second step is we go to the granule, which is the individual data sets. Could be a CTD profile, could be a sample, whatever. Could be a bathymetry survey. And those we have right now about 10 million in these systems. And these systems, they are very dynamic, they're alive. Let's say they have a lot of providers, originators of data. And every day we see more data coming through their pipes, getting well, let's say, validated, getting well documented, so that it's able, let's say, that we do this harvesting. And all this harvesting and interaction is done by machine to machine. There's no human interaction, it's all done by machines. And that's also one of the risks, of course, in the system, that somebody changes something in the basement, let's say an API or a web service, then you might get some errors. And this is something that we have to strive for in the near future, that we make all these systems much more stable and also much more fair, in fact. Let's say they have to be well documented again. So we need, in fact, best practices to develop for web services. And that sounds easy, but it's not so easy. Let's say something is not done yet. Okay, let's continue. So we have this service, and it means that somebody can, let's say, with a common interface can do a search for certain data and then drill down to the individual data sets, put them in a shopping basket and then retrieve it. And for this we have some sort of a temporary cloud storage where we can retrieve the data and then deliver. But also we can push it immediately into the virtual research environment where other people, say, doing the research can pick it up and work in that environment. And that research environment is, let's say, collaboration, sharing, reuse, and reproducibility. The last one is very important because that's the R in the fairness. And that's also the one which is most difficult because a lot of people can do the F and the A, finding and accessing, that's not so difficult. Interoperable, we're making very good headways there. But reproducibility is still in its infancy, I would say. And there relies a lot on provenance and being able to reproduce the same experiment, the same use case. And that means that you must have everything under control in the whole workflow, but also you have to keep it under control in the workflow. And that's quite still a risky thing, I would say, because partly we are building upon X, and those X are very vulnerable. Okay, but anyway, we have this virtual research environment, and in the case of Blue Cloud, the core system is from D4Science, which is from CNR in Pisa, but we're also working together with EGI, with UDAT, and with Copernicus, Vecchio, and this is something is more and more also a federation, say, on the horizontal level between all these computing centers. And that, of course, brings in much more facilities, more storage, more computing, and that is all available, in fact, to the scientists to make use of this. Then we have support for Docker, support for Jupyter Hub, etc. And like you say, if there's need for other technologies, we can simply install and configure this and make it available for the scientists. Because that's part of the open door philosophy. The floor is open, people can join, they can bring in use cases, they can develop virtual labs under the heading of the Blue Cloud, and they can make use of those facilities. And if a lot of them ask for certain additional facilities, we'll try to make sure that we get those also installed and ready for use. Then we have virtual labs in this first round. We have 5 of them. Several are, let's say, multidisciplinary, so we do environment in connection, let's say, with biology, with ecosystem. So a lot of the big challenges that we have, especially for the mission Ocean, so not the most easy one. And also we had a lot of, let's say, dissemination, promotion, communication. So we had a hackathon that was very successful. We had 150 people applying, and we had 20 teams. And within a couple of days, several of these teams were able to use all the tools and the data to really produce some virtual labs themselves, which were excellent. And some of them are now part of, let's say, I call it new projects that they started. And we also had a lot of synergies, because what we try in the Blue Cloud is to build a community. And as I said, it's very open. So let's work with everybody and see how we can make the best out of this, because we have to go this way if we really want to achieve also the challenges that the digital twins of the oceans and the mission ocean, restoring our ocean, bring to us. So we really have to be open and work together and share our knowledge and our experience and our data. So you can say the conclusion was that, in fact, let's say the project demonstrated that this works. We can do a federation of data sources. We can do a federation and build up a theory. We can support virtual labs, and they can create new knowledge, new science and new knowledge, which is useful for solving the big challenges that we have. Based on this, we made also a strategic roadmap by doing a lot of consultation with all levels of society, from EU or commissioner up to, let's say, citizen science. And in this roadmap, let's say, we targeted a number of, I would say, objectives or targets that we need to develop to be ready for the mission ocean. And also to be able, let's say, to deliver services for the digital twins of the ocean, but also make further headway with, let's say, the European Open Science Cloud. And this, I would say, download this roadmap because it's very interesting. It really describes the whole landscape, but also a lot of strategy is in there. And we use that same strategy to develop the successor project, which is Blue Cloud 226, where we are trying to, there's always my favorite things, we make it larger horizontally and we make it deeper in the vertical. And that's also, let's say, I always want to go further, add more people to the group, but also get more knowledge on board, more experts, and this way, let's say, be able to do bigger things than we did before. And that's like a snowball effect, and it always works in the European domain because you have a strong story, you already have a ball is rolling, you just create more energy, and that's the whole thing. And having excellent people on board, of course, you're able to achieve that. Okay, then we have, this is the nutshell, the Blue Cloud 226. I won't bother you with all the details, but the idea is that we go deeper in the federation, and that means that we want to look more at the fairness of those web services, so making sure that the research infrastructures have more well-documented and more, let's say, a common functionality for the web services, instead of doing all the plumbing that we did right now. We connect a lot of pipes, which are quite unique, I would say, but we have to be able. And also we have to strive for more robustness, so it means that things have to be persistent, and they have to be really in the production domain, which is TRL 8 or even 9, and not still at that experimental domain. Also what we're going to do in this case is we introduce some workbenches, and workbenches means that we focus on producing essential ocean variables, collections which are regularly then updated, and they are high quality data collections, for instance for temperature and salinity, also for nutrients, or in this case also for plankton. And they will feed into the digital twins of the ocean because they want to run what-if models, and those models really need high-quality collections. And the idea here is that in the Blue Cloud 226, we develop those methodologies, we test out that procedure for the workbench, and later it will be adopted by Copernicus Marine and who each of them have their own products, let's say, and can work with these workbenches. And that's how then also the Blue Cloud 226 serves as a development lab for those, say, major programs. Okay, the virtual research environment also will further evolve. That means that we add more capacity. We connect EGI and EU, UDAT, and also we give, of course, more support and to all the different players in the setting. Now let me go fast. Here are the workbenches. Then lastly, we have a lot of synergy, and that means that I really invite everybody in this room, if you are in a good project, you have a very good use case yourself, you have data, but you also want to use other data, let's say from the authoritative resources. And they could also, not only of course European, you can also have connection to the World Ocean Database, etc. It's open. Please come to us, apply, let's say, for the use case. And this way, let's say, try to roll into this work, because we really need you, and we can offer you a lot of things. And by combining these, let's say, we can really make further progress in the achievements that we need for the mission Ocean. So I want to thank you for your audience. Thank you.
Thanks, Dix. Everyone's been pretty much spot on time, so this is a good thing. Questions from the room for the three introductory speakers? Any questions around? Oh, no. No questions? Was it all clear? Really?
Do you need more coffee?
Yeah.
If you want some coffee, of course, I mean, you can go always on the back.
You know where the coffee is, so if you need a coffee boost, just go and get one. Otherwise, we just keep going. And we will be moving in. I think we have Martin Hasselöv online.
Yes.
Yes? Ah, there you are. Hi there. Hi, welcome to Genoa.
Thank you.
Martin is a colleague of mine from Sweden. He's responsible for an Ocean Decade project called Sailing for Science. And I'm pretty sure some of us in the room will fit very well under that project. Martin, over to you. It's a pity not to have you here. The coffee is great. All the focaccia is fantastic. I'll bring some with me back to Gothenburg for you, right? Over to you.
Great. Thanks, Patrick, Antonio. Yeah, I wish I would be there as well. It seems like a great network. So I'm representing Sailing for Science, as you said, Patrick, one of the co-founders, which is an UN Ocean Decade endorsed project. And our vision is sailors united to surface deep ocean realities. And you can read more about our mission on our webpage. Next slide, please. And our sort of key factors I like to raise is that we are connected to universities and research programs such as these two EU projects, for example, but we're also working now with collaborating with Emonet to try to facilitate citizen science towards international data aggregator and databases. So next slide, please. So in a nutshell, Sailing for Science is about contribution to ocean observation by sailing boats, but also raising ocean awareness through citizen science and other activities, and capacity building for developing countries with frugal innovation. Like we'll come back to more of these three in a minute. But when we talk about sailing and science, often you get the response that, can you really do science from sailboats? Maybe not in the crowd here and in the Ocean Race goal. But next slide, please. So the answer to that is, of course, I mean, sailing research vessels have been the best practice for at least last 2 centuries, and but it was only forgotten about 70 years. But sort of in favor of motorized research vessels. But now there is an interesting trend that very professional research expedition vessels are being done with under sail, and of course it is a lower environmental footprint and cost effective as well. And what I will come back to when it comes to citizen science is also based on experience we have learned from research expeditions from sailboats. So next slide, please. So this is just some examples from various cruises in coastal waters in the Baltic Sea and the Mediterranean. And we use light duty, but still high quality equipment and get some experience. So next slide. This shows the co-founder and director of Sailing for Science, Murat Ardalan from NTNU. Their first Sailing for Science expedition in the Aegean Sea. Next slide, please. And here is their last, or most recent 2 expeditions in Africa together with the University of Ghana, University of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, using traditional local boats and frugal innovation. So simple, it doesn't have to be low tech, but it should be operable without a lot of advanced resources or infrastructure. Next slide, please. So what we have learned by taking volunteers on various research activities is that collecting data is one thing, but also the effect it has on the people, on the volunteers or crew. So providing often a transforming on ocean awareness experience. Next slide. And we have also just informally borrowed out various tools to sailors, and then that was the background to Sailing for Science, starting to realize with this, with sailing citizen science. But what is then, I mean, the focus here is low cost sensors. Next slide. And we just want to raise with, when we thought a lot about this, it's not only low cost, but it needs to be balanced between feasibility, relevance, and quality. And with relevance, we're thinking especially the essential ocean variables that have been internationally agreed. That is very relevant. But feasibility should be with a limited amount of training. It should be robust. It should be possible to maintain, calibrate if necessary. And quality should be good enough quality, but consistent quality. And balancing these three factors, and of course it's great if it's low cost, but it's not only low cost that is important. And next slide, please. So the approach that we are taking is to offer existing tools on an entry level to sort of the broader base of sailors that wants to do some citizen science. So there are apps. There is the SECIDIS. You can do surface temperature using sieve trawls and meshes, so on. But for those that wants to do a little bit more and are engaged, we have offered and borrowed some sort of medium cost but high quality mini CTDs measuring the physics of the sea in coastal waters. And for a few that we call semi-pro level that really wants to engage, we also have a bank of semi-professional multi-parameter CTDs. And I will show one example in next slide. We have Ocean Ladies here that will tell about their project in detail. But this has been a very nice example for us to get engaged with, together with the Finnish Meteorological Institute and EMODnet, want to build a test case using these tools of the CTD and the multi-parameter CTD, measuring quite a range of relevant parameters. And they will tell you more about that in a minute. So next slide is the final. So I don't know if there's time for questions, but thank you very much for the attention.
Thanks a lot, Martin. Nice presentation. Really good timing too. So we're happy about that. Do we have any questions from the room? Anyone who wants to ask something to Martin about Sailing for Science? People are very, yes, we have one. I'll run with, okay. Microphone is on the way.
Thank you. Maybe if you could just give some details about the type of measures, the type of instruments, and who analyzes the data after all.
Yes, the measurements that everyone can do is for those that are for example, the SECIDIS or sea surface temperature. Then we have borrowed out these CTDs that have been provided. We have collected the data, and now we are in the process together with EMODnet to provide data flow, because there is to have the data flowing into the official repositories. So far we have been looking at the quality control of the data, and now that's also the process that we are in currently, establishing the data flows.
Thank you. Martin, I have another question. I mean, do you provide any documentation about the different sensors, how to deploy them? Because, I mean, you are in the Baltic mainly. If some people from the band would like to join and follow, how can they learn about how to deploy, how to use some of the sensors that you also can provide them with?
Yes, so we are now in the stage where we have a few, let's call it medium quality or semi-professional instruments that we have been borrowing out on a case-by-case basis. But we have high expectations from also the presentations that will follow on being able to scale, because that's a factor that the do-it-yourself electronics or sensors, that is what we really have great hopes to be able to channel into best practices, because we can only provide some tenths of boats with instruments on this state, but there are millions of boats, or at least hundreds and thousands of engaged boaters along the coastlines, that it's with potential platforms for data acquisition. So great hopes to hear the other presentations on what is to come.
Perfect. Thanks, Martin. We need to move on. And you basically already introduced our next speakers, right? Because you had them on there and you mentioned them several times. So I would just welcome Ocean Ladies up to the stage to present on your activities. This is something just came out we met in Helsinki just by chance, and then everything just started to evolve and start to happen. So it's so nice to have you here today. And over to you.
Hey, thank you so much, Patrick. Okay, Mr. Study. Right. So, hello, Genova. I am Taru.
And I am Sari.
And we are the Ocean Ladies, not all of them. But we would like to welcome you to sail with us for cleaner seas. Okay, our video didn't run, but never mind. We were kind of prepared for that.
We forget that.
So we are Ocean Ladies. We were founded by our skipper and commodore in 2017 in Finland. We love sailing and also want to take care of the seas. We now, very suddenly, we grew into an organization of 200 members. We range from 20 to 78 years old, and we have about 5,000 followers in social media at the moment. Our key theme is for cleaner seas. We have now completed 4 Atlantic crossings, and Sari and me just were on one of them last spring. But so we are an association for women, and we want to offer women, like ordinary women like us, like teachers, nurses, scientists, who don't have the money and not always the time either, to experience ocean sailing and even ocean racing. And we want to do that very responsibly, respecting the seas and the unique ecosystems that you are researching, and focusing especially on offshore sailing. And we are open for new members. It's not a closed society in any way. But hey, Sari, tell us about the yacht.
Yes, a few facts about our yacht, which is called Carissa. It's a traditional Swan 441. It was built in 1980 and designed by Ron Holland. And it's 13 meters long, 4 meters wide, with 21.5 meters mast. And it sleeps 8 sailors. And here is a big picture from our boat inside. And this is one of the Atlantic crossings, actually. And you can see while the others are resting, our skipper, Raija, is working with navigation or something like that. So it's quite a small place where you need to work.
And so our last season was a really good one. Compared to a normal year, it actually lasted a lot longer because we started from Finland in spring and we ended back in Finland the next year in the autumn. So it was actually 16 months and 350 days on the ocean, boat maintenance for 50 days and 80 days in harbor just having fun, and 13,000 nautical miles. That's a massive amount of sailing. And we crossed 20 countries, and we offered 41 separate legs for our members to sail with us. And we actually sailed with more than 100 ladies on our boat last season. And this is the map where we started. We went down from Finland along the kind of Kiel Canal, German Bay, English Channel, down the coast, over the Bay of Biscay, and down to the Canary Islands, and over the Atlantic to Caribbean, where we sailed the winter, and then went up from St. Martin to Bermuda and to Azores, and then all the way back to Finland. So we're really, really good sailing. Our boat was absolutely battered when we came back. But tons of good sailing. But hey, so what do we do this year?
Yes, the last picture, it was from the Baltic Sea, actually. It's the kind of like the home base for Carissa. While it's in Finland, it will stay in Helsinki. So if you ever stop by in Helsinki, give us a call. But now, at the moment, Carissa is sailing towards Stockholm, where it will attend on Gotland Rund. And then it will continue to south of Sweden, and from there to Norway, Stavanger, Bergen, and Shetland Islands, and from there all the way back to Finland, where it will be on some time of October. Yeah. And that's the time when we get up the boat.
Yeah, we have maintenance plans.
Yes. And besides other activities than sailing, there is some of these legendary offshore races, which I already mentioned, Gotland Rund. And then there is one important thing for us, it's participation in Baltic Sea Day. It's a traditional event for protecting Baltic Sea, and it will be held in Helsinki in August.
Okay, thanks. So let's talk a little bit more about the citizen science that we do, because our theme, the For Cleaner Seas, is that well, we love sailing, but at the same time we want to do it as responsibly as possible and not to burden the ocean. We have kids, some of us have grandkids, we really want to keep the oceans for them as well to sail. And that involves a lot of waste management, recycling, the choices of materials that we use, and also the food choices, what kind of foods we take on board. We take the sustainability angle into consideration. And we also work with these foundations and Finnish Environmental Institute that are kind of focused on the Finnish nature and the Baltic Sea. And for them we have performed this basic citizen science measurements and uploaded the data into the Finnish Environmental Institute's database. But that's only helpful when we are in the Baltic Sea, and we are somewhere else most of the time. So here you can see us like using a Secchi disk. There are these kind of basic instruments that we've used, just like a thermometer, something to measure the acidity and oxygenation, that sort of things. But then we are on to something much bigger now, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Last but not least, we have recently started an international cooperation with FMI from Finland, and we have got a new instrument which is called EXO2 sonde from the University of Gothenburg. And this sonde is able to measure a lot more than our previous instruments, and it will also take our measurements to a new level, because everywhere we sail we can contribute to this citizen science and ocean research on a global scale. And at some point our data will be in IMONet, and that we need to talk about a little more. Yes. But here, actually, I'm happy to let you know that we just got the sonde to Carissa this week, and this picture is from last Wednesday when the first measurement was done. But we are still practicing, but we are really grateful for all the help we have got from Patrick and Martin and FMI in Finland and Sweden.
Okay. And that is our thanks to you. That is all. We love to sail. We are happy to collect the data. But we had some contact details in the slides, so if you are sharing the materials, because we have a web page, mostly in Finnish, but a little bit of English there as well. We are on Facebook, mostly in Finnish, but on Instagram in English. And we have our kind of email, forcleanerseas@oceanladiesfi, is where you can contact especially Sari, our Chief Science Officer, Soili, and myself. We will be reading that address.
No, thanks a lot. And now that you're going more global, think about putting more English on it, and then you will get much more people in. And what is so cool is that I met you in Helsinki. We connected you with Martin for Setting for Science, and we've just been ticking off the boxes. And my first request was, as long as we get all that data and you make it available, let's tick off the boxes. Any planned cruises to the Mediterranean? We may have some people around here who would be keen on to join you in the Med.
Okay, next season,
it.
once we are back from Norway and have done some more maintenance to make the boat a little bit more civilized.
Maybe the next one in the Med. Who knows?
But thank you.
Any questions? Anyone who wants to join? Yes, yes. Sorry, I can't join.
Maybe just a quick question on how easy it is for you as sailors to stop the boat to take the measurements, or do you have to stop the boat?
Yeah, we do. We need to take, especially now with the big sun, we need to take the sails down. And it depends on the weather. I mean, if it's calm, then it's kind of a fun activity to do. But of course, we can't do it in a storm or in rough seas or when we are in the middle of a very intense race. But then, But then on the other hand, I mean, we are there to sail, and that involves taking the sails down. It's good practice as well, so it's not a hardship.
Okay, so the way you normally do is to take down sails. You don't heave to. It's not enough. You really need to take the sails down.
I think when we are, because this new sond goes deeper, it goes lower than 100 meters, so just like getting it down there takes quite a lot of time. I think with the castaway that we experimented with the smaller instrument, that was okay, but now with the bigger ones, it's a full operation. But something that we are really happy to do.
We saw in the race some very interesting measurements being taken where they bring the water into the keel, and then it's available on board to do the measurements. Is there ever a possibility that you could refit this to do ongoing measurements?
Well, that's an interesting proposal. We haven't considered that yet. That has not been kind of on the agenda so far, but that's, especially since we take the boat up now next winter. And we intend to do some other things, so we'd be really interested to find out more about how that would work.
There's some good ferry box measurements that come from Finland that would be very appropriate for what you're doing.
Okay. As you can see, we don't know anything about this stuff. We just sail.
Another question is, do you think it will be room also to ship some other devices like drifting buoys or more sophisticated instrument, because that could be also a ship opportunity activity that can be done.
So basically saying that maybe you can bring some sensors on board that other ones want to have deployed in some specific area. So just by doing that, saving a lot of money and resources, that you bring something along, you deploy it in a specific place on behalf of someone else who otherwise would have gone there as well. So
because we saw that Ocean Races has already done it, especially in leg 2 and leg 3. So from Cabo Verde to Cape Town, and from Cape Town to Itajaí, so in the Southern Ocean. So they released some of drifting buoys that are about 1 meter in diameter, something like that, in a very remote area. But I mean, as you're
actually we
planning,
saw something like that in the middle of the Atlantic,
and
I was like,
That's true.
what exactly is that, and how is it here?
because in that case again, it could be a shipping opportunity that could fit also in the ocean ops.
yes,
Yeah.
So
there's a lot of opportunities here. You just keep putting them on the list.
Yep.
We will try to link you up wherever necessary, right?
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
there's a lot of fun stuff going.
Yeah. That's good to know. Thank you.
Okay, good. So from
Thanks a lot.
shipping opportunity, we start moving into sensors. So
Yes.
we would like to call on the stage Carsten to present on 2 degrees.
Thank you. Slide. Okay, perfect.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Karsten Schein. I'm with 2 Degrees C. We are a citizen science data collection organization based out of the United States, but with a potentially global reach. And a caveat that we are right now in the incipient stages of where we're going with all this. So some of what I will discuss has not yet happened, but it will. I'd just like to share this photo of my kids helping me test some of our equipment. So just showing that anybody can actually use these things. All right. As we've seen and we've heard, Giuseppe had mentioned, what was it, 59 zettabytes of data collected in 2020. That's a lot of data. And we look at a map of data points in the ocean. This is from the GOOS system, and it looks like a lot, right? But if we zoom in and take a closer look at the scale, we see that, just trying to get some of these data, not a lot of it is available. And what is available is few and far between. There's a lot of space between these data buoys. What's going on in those spaces? Your guess is as good as mine. And a lot of my colleagues in the biological sciences are saying, well, I'd like to connect this ecosystem to ocean temperatures, but I don't have any data for that. And these huge gaps are actually a big problem for marine researchers and people trying to understand how do we conserve the oceans. So this is the problem. What is our solution? Our solution is to generate a global network of people who care about the environment, want to do something about the environment, but they don't know how. And if we can automate the ability to collect data to where somebody simply needs to have a sensor, like so, on their hat, their backpack, their diving gear, their sailboat, wherever. And it automatically is collecting good quality data. As Jay mentioned, we don't necessarily need research quality data down to the 1,000th of a degree of accuracy. 1/10 of a degree will actually work pretty well. As a scientist, I've put hundreds, maybe thousands of hobo data loggers in the ocean. And they collect good data. Not, seabird level data, but good data. Data I can use in my research. So our approach is, how do we get more data? And how do we get more data that scientists can trust from citizen scientists? And how do we give these volunteers around the world a sense of, I am doing something positive for the environment? Okay, but at the same time, without any training to do so, without any necessity that I've got to now interrupt what I'm doing to go and drop a Secchi disc into the water, or a castaway, or observe the corals and record what color they are. All of those have some subjective observer bias to them. All of those have an issue where scientists may say, I don't necessarily trust these data. So what this does, and let me just share this. So hanging from my wrist is our ocean sensor, temperature, depth, light. We're working on conductivity with our great partner Sensoid up in Sweden, Frederick Gustafsson, and he is building these things and doing a great job with it. And our part of this is getting them out into the world. So what we're trying to do is say, hey, we can put these on everything and anybody out there, whether you're rolling around the city in your wheelchair, whether you are trekking the backcountry, whether you are diving coral reefs, whether you are sailing across the Atlantic, these things can be observing the environment. We have been endorsed as a Marine Life 2030 Ocean Decade project, so that's underscoring, I think, the importance of where we can go with this. And critically, it makes sense. A typical data buoy to build it, install it, maintain it, over its life can cost millions of dollars, especially if you're talking something way out in the middle of the Pacific. But even coastal buoys, 50,000 is a very easy cost. 100,000 is more normal, maybe 200,000. How many of these could you get for $200,000? These things cost roughly around 150 euros to manufacture, to get out there. So quite a lot, several thousand of these things, not bad. So that's several thousand data points instead of a single data point at any given time. Now, the question is, how do these measure up to something like a data buoy that's sitting out there collecting data? Well, there's me with my hobos on a coral reef. That's one observation at any given time. Okay, I take 1 minute observations. Hey, I've got a nice data set, but it's one observation at one spot. Do I know it's accurate? Reasonably. I've calibrated these hobos against other instruments and such, so I'm reasonably confident it's good. Now, what happens if you have 20 divers all in a group going around that same coral reef, and they've all got one of these with them? Now you've got 20 observations. You can create a distribution, and you can see, are there any that are not performing well? What is the sort of the mean, the median of this distribution? Is it normally distributed? We can use that for quality control, and so we can give the scientists confidence that when they use these data, they're getting something that is reliable. Here is just an example of what this looks like. If you go to the dashboard, you can see that there is actually a fair bit of variability going on in temperature and light down at depth. So this is important stuff. And what we can do with this as well is we can give our participants some ownership in this data. So they get credit for collecting observations, and we work with partners to say, if they collect enough credits, can this observer, can this volunteer, this participant, can they exchange it for something that you offer? Maybe, they like diving, so we partner with somebody like, say, Cressy, and they say, I'd like a new Cressy face mask. I can exchange some of my credits for that. So they get some ownership in that. We can also track who's using those data and then let the participant know, hey, your data was used in this research project, and here's a link to the publication. So they get bragging rights. So think about how many millions of people dive, sail, hike the backcountry every year, every day, every hour. If they can be collecting data this easily, why not? And with that, I will say thank you.
Questions?
Hi. So I had a few questions about the sensors. I was just wondering for how long can they go? So what's their life?
Sure.
span?
So a typical battery, this one operates on a coin cell, a coin battery, and this one operates on a rechargeable battery. And the coin battery will last roughly a year with average usage. I mean, if you're really using it every single day, it'll probably last a little less, but it's user replaceable. This one, you would just simply unscrew the housing and charge the USB port, and it will last about a month.
Okay.
And then all of the data is passed through your phone app right up to our cloud.
Ah, okay. So they go direct to the cloud. Okay. And are they shared with an official repository? Everybody can download them, or?
Correct. It's fully open data. We protect the participants' anonymity and such by not sharing. You cannot download, for example, I want all the data from this particular sensor.
Yeah.
But you can say, we have it in a relational database where you can say, I would like the data from this location or this area for this period of time. So it's not a traditional data set where you have to download the entire, 3,000 petabytes of data to get the 3 data points that you actually need for your research.
So I have only one last question. What's the maximum depth they work at?
These things will go down there. They will survive to 400 meters.
All right.
The barometer on there, the pressure sensor, is a 7-atmosphere pressure sensor. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, one more, and then we move to the next one. By the way, it's you.
I guess I wanted to ask, what are the next steps for it? Is it like getting lots of hearts and minds aligned, getting lots of people to adopt it? Yeah, what's the plan in the next year?
yes, yes, and yes. Our biggest goal right now is to get this out of our beta testing phase, where right now friends and family are taking it in the water and hiking up the mountains with it and such, and we're making sure that it actually works in all sorts of environments. So the next step is then to finalize the design, work out a few of the kinks in the data flow and the communications. The sensors themselves are awesome. They're using really high quality chips. They're getting accurate data, usually within about 1/10 of a degree. So really awesome. And then just getting the funding to start getting these things out there. We're hoping that that can be something that you can almost buy these on Amazon or something and just take it out there. You don't need training. Anybody can do it. And yeah, so it really is something that can grow to where anybody can use it without needing to be trained in how to use it or without interrupting what they're doing. Just enjoying their dive, enjoying their hike, whatever. It's doing its thing.
Good. One last question. Anita, come with me. Maybe you said, how many data points have you already been collected?
Pardon?
How many data points do you already have?
Just with our beta test, we've probably got several 100,000. But if you had 1 million people out there collecting data, and they each collected 60 data points in a day, 1 hour worth of collection, 60 million observations in a day, not bad.
Not bad, yeah, at all. Good. Thank you again, and. And I invite Anita to present on sail.
Thank you.
Go that side.
Oh, is it up this time? Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Anita from Ocean. We're making autonomous wind and solar-powered micro-vessels that collect ocean data. So I'm going to tell you who we are, what we want to do, and then what we're very keen to learn from people here. So firstly, who we are. So we're an early-stage startup. I've been working on the technology for 2 years now. The initial tech was developed when my co-founder and I were at Imperial College London, and we've been looking at the commercial side for a year. And Ocean initially came about because whilst I was studying aeronautical engineering, I came across something called the Micro Transat Challenge, which is this challenge for autonomous sailboats to cross the Atlantic Ocean. And there are 3 key things that make this challenge so difficult and the reason that no one's done it yet. So firstly, the boats have to be less than 2 meters in length. That's actually just a power restraint because it means you can only fit so many solar panels on the deck. The second thing, it has to be fully autonomous. Once it crosses that start line, if it gets into a storm, if it crashes into a ship, if it gets lost because of a strong current, you can't do anything. It has to figure that out all by itself and get back on course. And then the final requirement, can't just sail 4,000 miles and cross the Atlantic. It has to get to a finish line 25 miles in radius, which makes a really difficult navigation challenge. And no one's completed this fully autonomous crossing yet, and that's what we set out to do. Unfortunately, people have tried this every single year, and they've always failed. And one of the big reasons that the fully autonomous ones have gone wrong is bad navigation. So I decided to focus my master's thesis on navigation algorithms for this. And an navigation algorithm's output is only good as its input, and the input here was ocean data. Only the ocean data was quite difficult to get hold of in the middle of the Atlantic, which led me to the question of where does that ocean data actually come from? And as a complete novice to the industry, I was quite surprised to find that you're getting this critical ocean data from chartering a ship or finding a vessel of opportunity, going out into the middle of the Atlantic, throwing some balls of plastic overboard, and after 3 months or so, they've drifted away from where you want them to be, and you have to do the whole thing all over again. And what makes this even more difficult as well, I think this is a visualization of drifter tracks over the course of a month. As you can see, it's way better than nothing, but it gives very patchy spatial coverage because they're just at the mercy of the currents. You end up with this kind of mismatch instead of a nice uniform grid, which is what you really need if you're going to get accurate predictions for the ocean. So Ocean initially came about as the Drifting Buoy 2.0. Take the ball of plastic with sensors inside, give it limited actuation, give it some wind propulsion, give it some solar power, so it can stay out for longer than 3 months, and hopefully use that to get a nice uniform grid of data points from vessels that sail themselves there and then stay in position instead of drifting around and going to where you don't need them. So, quick thing to say, and this is where the low-cost technology really comes into its own. So that, we're not the only people making autonomous vessels, right? But the initial ones that are out there now, they're these large, clunky, expensive assets. They're like 7-10-meter autonomous vessels. And as a result, they're heavily regulated, they have full-time remote pilots, and they're hugely expensive. The costs spiral because they're so big, because they need a lot of these extra things, because the forces are so much larger. By being just 1 meter in length, the forces we experience are much less, the costs for manufacture are much, much less, and this is especially important for weather data. For something like, winds and currents, you don't want one really nice data point. You want 100 data points, spread out, actually giving you a picture of what's going on in a wider space. So that's why we've gone so small, and that's why we've gone so small, simple, and robust. And I think the way that I like to summarize this is, you've got sail drone out there. They're doing any sensor, anytime, anywhere, which is great for seabed mapping. But we would much rather be a really limited range of sensors, but all the time and everywhere. So that's what we want to do. So far, we've designed a prototype. We're testing it out in the Irish Sea. It's doing small autonomous hops, collecting metocean data right now, so winds, temperature, we're working on waves. That's a bit more tricky. And we've tested it up to a force 6, which is kind of the limit we were happy to go out in ourselves. Commercially as well, I think when it comes to ocean literacy, I think it's very frustrating how little awareness there is about how important our oceans are. I'm a really good example of this. I'm a passionate sailor. I've sailed on Baltic Sea, Irish Sea, North Sea, and until 2 years ago, I didn't really understand that oceans are so important, which is crazy. I'm embarrassed about that. But so therefore, any excuse to go to the media and shout about how important the oceans are and the need for more data, we'll grab that and we'll go and tell people how critical it is. So in the short term, we're looking to work with research organizations next year to pilot out using our vessels. So if anyone has a research project that they think is interesting, where a drifter isn't appropriate, but a large ASV is just not practical, we'd really like to talk to you. And then also more commercially, we're not just going to be like a citizen science type thing. There are a lot of commercial goals that happen that could be done so much better with low-cost technologies. So take, say, if you're developing an offshore wind farm, right now, to check that there are no marine mammals that are going to be messed over, you get a ship, you put some people on it, you then zoom around towing a microphone, and then you do that once a day to make sure there are no dolphins around. You could have, this thing sitting out there for the whole day, actually giving you much better live data in a much more low-cost way. So that's what we're hoping to do more commercially as well. But the long-term goal is what gets us really excited. So we think that having our data and collecting data in areas of the ocean that are really underobserved, so specifically the Southern Ocean, really remote areas that have sparse data coverage, we think if we can collect data there, we'll be able to improve a lot of our weather predictions. Although that's what we'd really like to talk to you about, because we know we can collect the data, but we want to know how to use that to make things happen. And that's what the people in the audience are much more experienced than me on. So we'd really appreciate advice and guidance on that. So yeah, this just kind of brings home really visually what we want to do. So this is what 100 drifters in this area can do. There's about 100 there. This is the tracks over the course of a month. And yeah, with 25 of our micro vessels doing the same distance over a month, This is the coverage that we think that we could achieve. And yeah, for me, this is what gets us really, really happy. Like, this is what we want to make happen. We just need to figure out how to use that to make the most impact. So finally, what we'd like to learn from you. I've put some prompt questions up on here. So, you know, where are the best areas for us to go to? What's the most useful way for us to validate our data? So immediately we're going to sail next to some moored buoys and compare our data to that to make sure it's of good quality. But again, like, you know, I'm a bit too young to have a distinguished career in ocean observations. I'd really like to learn from the people that have on how we can best do that. So yeah, if you are remotely interested in what we're doing and you're happy to give some advice, please come chat to me. We're really keen to learn from everyone. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Anita. We need more data. We need to share more data. So don't forget to promote also Imonet.
So I would just like to ask, in your design for navigation, can you also design it to stay on station?
Yes, so station keeping is something we think we'll have to have. So we have a rigid wing sail, and we can fairly easily set it at an angle to the wind such that it generates no lift. So it won't be moving fast, however, it will still have windage. So it'll essentially act like a glorified drifter, and that's the best we can have it for station keeping.
Gotcha.
Other questions?
What you can do against stolen?
Pardon?
What you can do against somebody want to stolen your boat?
We can't do anything. So, I mean, our boats, so our boats move at like 2 knots. If someone sees us and wants to pick us up, it's not like we can run away from them. I think as well, looking at what's happening in the industry, so I read a thing, like the Iranian Navy tried to kidnap a couple sail drones some time ago. It was in the news, and it's like, you know, if they're kidnapping these things, maybe they'll, people will try to pick us up. So we'd rather just make our things really small and really cheap so that it's of lower consequence if someone picks them up.
Thank you.
Yeah.
By the way, you also have a GPS, so you can always...
Yeah, we do have we've redundant GPS systems all over, so we'll know someone's nicked it, but we can't stop people stealing it. Yeah.
Any other question?
Just a comment, and please let us help you out with setting up data flows and all that.
Please.
And we tick off every box on the way to make your data available to the rest of the world. We'll be so happy to help you out doing that.
Yeah, good.
I plan about a presence in the Met. Okay, so we move to the next one. That is, in line with, this presentation, because she is going to present also some result they're already collecting from mini boats. So, Cassie, I would like to welcome I would like to welcome you on the stage and to present on education on passenger.
Great, thank you.
Cassie, let's do it again, okay? Because Cassie got me interested in this area because I discovered the mini boats, and then since then I got just hooked on it, right? So it's a pleasure to have you here in Genoa, and enjoy.
Thank you so much. It's so awesome to be here. So we're Educational Passages. We're based in the US, but we're helping people connect with each other around the world. So our mission is to connect people around the world to the ocean and each other, and we're doing that through unique global experiences. So because we're at the ocean race, I'm going to start with where I started with the ocean race was back in Newport. So we were in the exploration zone with the Thompson Middle School students. These are 7th graders that had been working this last school year to build their mini boat. And these mini boats are 1.5 meter long, uncrewed sailboats designed to sail on their own wherever you want. The idea started back in 2008, and now we have a very comprehensive program which is helping students customize the project as their own. They get to name it. These students also got to meet Team Malizia in their Ocean Data Challenge at Newport, and they also named their mini boat in honor of them, the TMS Sea Challenger. And this is just a map. I was watching the track of the ocean race come up to Newport, and all the other dots and lines are mini boats that were at sea at the time. So we had our own little mini race happening at this time. So the program works where we send all the parts. The boats are prefabricated, hand-built fiberglass, and we put the curriculum in there, everything they need, the GPS trackers, sensors, and help them with this experience. But they do all the work. They're working in teams and working together, like I said, to customize the experience. And then I am pressing down. Can you go next slide? I can't, pressing down, but it's not. There it goes. Did I skip? It skipped one. Ah! I wanted to show the launch. Okay, build. It's not working. Which one was that? It's just not, okay. All right. So we've had almost 200 boats launched. Many of them have multiple voyages. In fact, we've had one that was launched first in 2016 and was just recovered in the Bahamas, having stopped in 5 different countries. We've had mini boats landing in over 30 countries throughout the program, almost 2 million kilometers tracked, and a really good landing rate, 75%. And as we improve technologies, and now that our GPS trackers are solar powered, they're lasting longer. So we're working on improving that. And full steam ahead. So in the last couple of years, we've really advanced the mini boat to be a platform of opportunity to have sensors integrated into the boat. We realize these boats are going all over, so we want to collect as much data as we can. So we worked with an open source program called Maker Buoy, and Wayne, it's a drifting buoy on its own like this, and Wayne, a couple years ago, made a smaller version for us that fits right inside the cargo hold. And what's really great about this is that the students, as you can see here, install it themselves. So they're learning about the components as they're installing it, making a connection to, okay, this is what's going to collect the data when my boat's out at sea. And that ownership is really important. We also have cameras, and yes, that's a bird. We were going to charge him rent because he was hanging out for like a week. And the cameras are actually cool because it's helping us validate when the sails come off, because that's something that we're trying to work on is the mini boats are very unique with the wind effect, which is very helpful for forecasters and modelers. And we want to get that data to them, but we need to be able to know when that sail comes off because then they're being driven more by the currents. And that's just a pop-up of some of the data that you can explore in real time. Every boat has their own page, and so this is available for anybody to track as well. And IFADO. This is definitely a project that has been an accelerator for educational passages. And a couple years ago, the researchers there decided to everyone buy a mini boat kit and use this project to help scientists connect with students. And so many great things happened. We started with these partners, and all of these pictures are mini boat launches and places that they've reached, from Norway to Brazil and Guatemala, everywhere. And we still have a couple boats out at sea right now as well. And with that, it's been a really great partnership because it's helped advance our data to be accessible and into EmodeNet, and we're working on, again, getting that data into the models to help improve forecasts. The true goal is to get students to connect with each other, someone in a new place. And last year, we had a really exciting story where a mini boat from Rye, New Hampshire, ended up in Norway. But it ended up in Norway after 4 months of silence. And so there was this just, oh, what happened to our boat? What happened to our boat? And it was, the students had built the boat during COVID. But then when the boat was launched, they were tracking it when they were all at home. And so it kept them all connected. And so when this boat landed, it had washed up, and the GPS sent one more location, and the story just went everywhere. And so this is what we really strive for. And ever since, the students are now pen pals, and they're going to be friends forever. We want to repair and relaunch. We want these to go as much as possible, make them really strong, just keep them going, and along the stops of the way, have everyone come on board. So this is one story of the HVS Cruiser, which started from Charleston, South Carolina. First went to Ireland. It was eventually repaired by Jim Walsh in Cork, Ireland, there pictured. And we relaunched it, and it is still out there, as you can see with the dark line down here. I was hoping it was going to land in the Canary Islands when I was there, but it did not. And the cycle starts over again, and we want to keep this going. And I had another slide in here that was showing that we also work with a lot of community partners to launch these mini boats, anywhere from cargo ship companies to research vessels to people with just a sailboat or a regular boat. So getting the community involved in every aspect of the program is really helping to connect us and make this program really great. So please join us, come on board. There's many opportunities. As we move forward, we want to help relaunch these boats, connect the people, get you involved, and try to make the cost of the boat a lot less and more eco-friendly, keep adding these sensors and doing what we can to move our mission forward. So, thank you.
Thank you.
We're happy to take some questions if we have some questions in the room here for Cassie. Sure? Yeah. Yes.
Just curious, how are you communicating the data off the boat in, I guess, almost real time, the GPS signals, any data coming off of it? How are you getting those data to wherever they're needing to go?
Yeah, great. So we actually use asset trackers from a company that's just for monitoring, trucks. That's a great partnership, but we have a data management system that takes the data from that on FTP, and then we put it into our website that populates those boat pages and puts them all together.
So is it going up through satellite? Or?
Yes, yeah, Iridium.
Other questions? None? I'm checking out Voto. It's time for Voto to go up to this stage. Hi there, Martin. And so Voto have their offices right next door to my institute's offices in Gothenburg. And since you guys came in to enter the community, it's been fantastic. You created a lot of momentum going on in Sweden, but also around the Baltic. So I'm keen on to hear what you have to present about Voto today. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Patrick. So yeah, today I'm here to present Voto. And at Voto, we are a Swedish foundation focusing on research in the Baltic Sea. We are doing a lot of in-situ observations in different basins of the Baltic Sea with autonomous robots. But today I'm going to talk about something else because I already represented our observatories in the Baltic Sea on Wednesday. So Voto is not a university or a research institute, we are a foundation. So that doesn't make us citizen science, but you could say we are citizen-funded science. And at Voto, we work with, as I already mentioned, a lot of in-situ data collection and observation, but also we have participatory actions. And I guess where those two meet, citizen science can thrive. But that, of course, has its challenges, and I'll come back to that later. So we work with participatory actions in all over three sections. So we have, even though we are quite small, we have this education, humans in the sea, and ocean knowledge sections. And education is focused on creating engagement of the people with the ocean, mostly directed at younger people. Then we have culture and heritage through some books and so on, and ocean knowledge is where I am employed. So we are focusing on the data collection and the science in the Baltic Sea. And starting with the education section, they create this beautiful materials that are aimed at children. Here it's in Swedish, of course, but there's a collection of like movies and books and games, all in cooperation with the Swedish illustrator Lasse Åberg, and there's a lot of materials that are aimed directly at the children that are available in different materials, and there's also material like aimed at teachers, so how they can use this material in a classroom environment. Then we have Humans in the Sea with several publications, books that often focus on archaeological sites in the Baltic Sea, for example, the beautiful shipwrecks that are extremely well conserved in the Baltic Sea because of the oxygen minimum zones. They last for centuries or even more than 1,000 years because nothing rots away in the depths of the Baltic Sea. And of course, there's ocean knowledge section. And even though we are mostly focusing on really collecting a lot of in situ data, we also, of course, take our responsibility to reach out and have participatory actions. For example, by representing all the data in near real time on our website, where are all the different assets, what are they measuring currently, to show this product, but also if there are like local sustainability events and similar. Me last week on the lower left, just joining an action of collecting marine litter and then kind of doing an assessment, what is it and what are other sustainability challenges of the Baltic Sea. But as I said, our focus there is really the data collection, and I think in cost-effective technologies we're quite good at Voto. So when I tell people that are not necessarily in marine science that I'm like a physical oceanographer, they often ask me like, "Oh, do you like diving?" And that kind of tells me, of course you laugh, but they kind of tells me as like an oceanographer we came quite far in collecting data, more effective than being in place, right? We of course had like tethered instruments that go down for us for a very long time, so we don't always need to be in place. And to drive this automatization further, the logical next step for me is of course our autonomous instruments, where we have here, for example, the Sea Explorer gliders that dive all the way from the surface to the sea floor, and the sailboys that we use a lot. Another way of being very cost effective is also the utilization of the devices. So we are kind of a hub for ocean science, so we really focus on using those instruments. We have them always in the water constantly, and that is a big difference to what I experienced at my time in university, where often like a device, maybe a measurement robot or so is purchased, and then maybe it's used for 1 or 2 projects, and then often it ends up in the basement on the shelf, which is of course very sad, but also due to the structure kind of how university works. When people are on 1 or 2 years contracts, then it's a lot of challenge for them, and we try to avoid that, of course, by like measuring as much as we can and giving other people access to our infrastructure. We are providing the technical support so everyone can apply to us with their scientific project and say, hey, I want a sensor there, or I want to use a glider, and we will do that. So I can encourage you to apply. We can have that relatively cheap through the centralization of the infrastructure. Then I had a part where I wanted to complain about how hard it is to do the citizen science because of the challenges of collecting the metadata consistently and having the calibration and the quality check. But now in the previous section, I already heard that there are great solutions to this, and people already thought about that, and I'm happy to hear more about that in the following session. So I think I'll skip over that and thank for myself.
Thank you, Martin. Is there any question for Martin? Otherwise, I would say that, you are presenting a very nice facility, in which, I mean, you said you are happy to host and deploy sensors, so we moved to other sensors. We started, I mean, this week with Nautilus project, that is quite ambitious project, because we are covering from policy science up down to sensor and citizen science. So I invite Katarina to present some of the results that we are collecting in this project.
It's down, right?
Yes, down.
So, hello, good morning, everyone. I'm Catarina Lemos. I'm the Technology and Innovation Manager of Nautilus project, like Antonio was mentioning. And I'm also the Project Manager at CEIA in Portugal. CEIA is a Center of Engineering and Product Development that implements and operates innovative products and systems for many different areas, including aeronautics, automotive, but ocean. And this is where I work, at the Space and Ocean Unit. So CEIA develops a marine animal tagging device, a cost-effective solution that we are working on in Nautilus. In Nautilus, we are integrating a dissolved oxygen sensor, and this is what we are going to show you today. Also, we are integrating some sensors, like Antonio was saying, in our own platforms that are the ASV and the lander. So these are our headquarters that Antonio is going to visit next year. And this is the Manta, this is our brand. So we developed tote tagging devices that enable non-intrusive, so it's different from some of the other things that we have in the market. We have timed deployments that we use galvanic releases. They are currently doing these deployments in Azores, in the Portuguese islands. I don't know, maybe I'm touching this, sorry. And we are tagging manta rays and blue sharks for now. It's capable of recording video footage and to store, oops, sorry, this is going alone. And to store environmental data like the dissolved oxygen that we have, and to ping location via satellite. Why did it start? It started in 2017. I'm going to show you a bit afterwards, but it started from the need to have more knowledge about the ocean, something that we are all worried about, and that's what we are discussing here today. Also to track animals and understand the environment where they are living and what we need to do to preserve it in a better way, and always with an idea of lowering the maximum the impact. And for now it has low impact, and we are able to recover the sensors always, so at least up to now, okay? So our vision, we decided that CEIA would like to go and jump into the market to develop this solution 100% in-house and to adapt and customize with all sensors that are requested. One of them was one of the sensors that we didn't have. We started with Nautilus, the dissolved oxygen sensor. It's a challenge because you need to shape the structure, but you are going to see what I'm talking about. So this is our first Manta, our first marine animal tagging device. It has a camera and light, and it was used to start doing the deployments and to follow the animals. As you can see, we are working with several partners like EMAR, BBC, universities, and all together we are collecting some needs. We are changing the devices or adapting. Sometimes we need to give up on some sensors or include other ones, and to start reaching the market and trying to give the solution that is necessary. Then Nautilus just jumped in and said we need a dissolved oxygen sensor because it's a gap that we have. And Nautilus, for those that were not here on Tuesday, so this is an Horizon 2020 with 21 partners, including CEIA, where I'm coming from. And we are developing underwater technologies for innovative and cost-effective ocean observation, covering 70% of the environmental ocean variables. And this is where they decided the dissolved oxygen was necessary. And we are having a Manta Nautilus. So this is our new device. I don't have it here with me, unfortunately, but we can make an online meeting and I can show you the device. It weighs around 1 kilo, so the drag studies are all performed that we can deploy them in a certain size of animal. What more? And the dimensions you can see, I can have some leaflets I can share or send it to you by email. We have satellite and radio information. We can dive up to 2,000 meters. That it's according to the environment of the animals that we are deploying. Also for data, we are going to collect the data and share the data, of course, in EMODNet with our colleague Antonio. So this is the video. I don't know if, yes? It's just a small video that I'm not going to show you all, but it's like the assembly video. Nautilus was important not only to build the new technology, but also to make it a bit more ready to be on the market as a commercial product. So now, because the client is going to assemble the device by themselves. So we just explain everything that we have, including the oxygen cap, the blue thing. So we have two containers, two metallic containers, tested for 2,000 meters, and people can just assemble it alone. I think we can stop. It's okay. And then I can show you all the video if anybody is interested. As you were able to see, I think, inside the red foam, you have two containers, one with electronics and one with the oxygen sensor. So these containers can be used alone without the foam. The foam is to be able to deploy and float and recover when you attach it to an animal, a marine animal. However, we can think about new approaches for these sensors. Maybe it's of interest of someone, and of course, if it is, I'm willing to speak now or into the B2B later this afternoon. So this is one idea, and maybe, I don't know. These are some of our clients that we work with already, and as I told you, the Nautilus sensor, the Manta Nautilus, is already in Azores for testing, and there is a great documentary that you can see. It's about the tagging the whale shark, and I think it's amazing. I don't have the link here, but I will add, so in case it's shared with all of you, you can check. And I think it's nice to see and understand the world. And this is our picture. You can see the manta over there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Wait.
I'm not running.
Wait there, because I'm sure there are some questions.
Could your sensors be used for tagging or maybe following up somehow the orcas that are terrorizing yachts on the Western European coasts?
I don't know. I think it's a great question, and I can share with you. So I'm not the engineer that is doing the drag studies, so we need to really understand. But it depends on attaching the device. We need to have a diver or two divers, or to attach so I didn't explain, but when you see the video, you are going to understand when the animals are really big, you need two divers, and then to face the animal, to attach the device, and then, so I think it's something nice and a great curiosity to solve, and we can speak about it with the engineer. I can make a meeting.
Especially if the big animals, whale shark.
Yeah. But I'm not going to say, I'm not the expert, I'm just the manager, so I need to be careful.
Any more questions? None?
I'm happy to show you some pictures. I think it will be nice. Thank you
that's
very
nice.
much for the
That's
invitation.
This has been a lot of information, right? So we need a break, I think. Lunch will be served in half an hour, but let's use this half hour to get some coffee, have a chat around, and then we have, it's 2 hours from now, right? So we come back. It's 2:30 we start again?
Yeah, but before that, you can tell about...
Yes. So there's one additional thing on the agenda here, but we managed to get a video from it. I'll just tell you briefly what it is about. There's the Chalmers Technical University based in Gothenburg. What they did was, Robin Tegland had a course, a 2-month course for techie students that really knew nothing about the ocean, and gave them 2 months to build ocean sensors. So reaching out to potential users and with that information to build a fit-for-purpose cheap sensor with a budget of about 150 euros per team. And this was, I think there were 18 teams, 18 sensors came out of it, and it was just amazing. And what they know now about the ocean after 2 months,
it's more than I know.
Yeah, it's more than we know, because they've been just digging into it and creating these really amazing sensors. I was lucky, I was on the kind of jury to choose the best one. We couldn't agree on one, we had to go for 2, and then we wanted 3, and that's where it started. So the amazing things. But when going around the room, we'll just put a video on, and you can get one example of one of these sensors, just to get an idea of it.
Just before starting the video, one very nice thing that I noted in this process, they put in practice something that we are discussing for the past 2 to 3 days, because they started from the needs. So they have a sort of discussion about the needs and the fit for purpose, and then they went down to the technology. So it was a nice collaborative approach in order to develop that.
So first, reaching out to users, what do you need? What kind of data are you lacking? Where? What areas? And then they start to design their sensors. A couple of them we are very keen on to get because they look amazing. One that was supposed to be here, but they couldn't make it, is a small little octopus, blue octopus, that measures surface temperature data. You just take it with you to the beach and put it in there, and off it goes. But this is a different one. This one is very technically advanced, and I was pretty blown away by what we're going to see here. So please have a look at it and enjoy.
Producing toxins and creating harmful conditions for our marine ecosystems. And their effects range from economic losses to ecological imbalances. Unfortunately, the conditions for their formation is still poorly understood, and more data is needed. That's why we're introducing the ACT sensor, the automatic chlorophyll A and temperature sensor, designed to measure the amount of chlorophyll A and the temperature in coastal areas in real time, enabling early detection of harmful algal blooms and making it possible for preventative work, as well as providing important data for further research.
Yes, our sensor is a low-cost floating buoy that utilizes spectroscopy to measure water's chlorophyll A content, and it includes a temperature sensor. It uses 3 diodes, red, green, and blue, to emit light, which bounces on 2 mirrors and enters the sensor. The continuous water flow between the mirrors enable the ongoing measurements of the amount of each color that passes through the water and reaches the sensor. The diodes' wavelengths are specifically selected to match chlorophyll A's maximum absorption as well as minimum absorption. By measuring the light collected, the sensor can determine the levels of chlorophyll A in the water. The sensor also has a live connection to the cellular network, which differentiates it from similar sensors. This sensor can also be manufactured in large quantities, for example as school projects, and be deployed across coastal areas to provide real-time data to stakeholders. The ACT sensor has the potential to benefit various stakeholders, including the tourism industry, fishermen, and researchers. To maximize its impact, we have chosen to focus on municipalities as contact points, creating a larger network of stakeholders compared to targeting individual stakeholders. And the bigger the network, the more valuable the data is for the users, which incentivizes an even larger community to collaborate to collect data to monitor the ongoing algal blooms.
Possible citizen scientists are students in high schools that could develop basic skills such as soldering, coding, and an understanding of physics behind optics and electronics, all while filling in important data gaps and increasing the public knowledge of harmful algal blooms and their damaging effects.
The data collected by the ACT sensor can be useful for ensuring beaches and swimming areas are safe for recreational activities. It is also essential for researchers and scientists to reduce the knowledge gap. Municipalities have a strong incentive to support this kind of initiative, as it can promote tourism and business operations in the short and long term. Don't miss out on this game-changing technology that has the potential to revolutionize the way we monitor and predict algal blooms. Join us in bringing this innovation to life and making our coastal areas safer for all. It is time to act. Thank you for listening.
There we are. It's just pretty awesome, isn't it? In 2 months' time, they did that. And we're already talking about getting some of these to put in sensitive areas around in the Baltic, and especially the Stockholm archipelago. So 18 similar kinds of initiatives coming out from 2 months university. That's super cool. Now, coffee, discussions, talk, connect, okay? See you in 2 hours.
Actually, if you don't mind, we were thinking about starting a bit earlier, sometime around 2, so okay, perfect.
Is that okay?
Yep, so we have half an hour now before the lunch, because lunch is coming, so you can enjoy the coffee, chit-chatting. Yes, why not? We can have a group picture, yes, of course. Yeah, and then the second thing is we start around at 2 p.m. so we save some time. So yeah, and then yes.